He does me double wrong that wounds me with the flatteries of his tongue. William Shakespeare. In that quote, Shakespeare is talking about the application of a double standard. In the seeking of truth, of knowing the real from the unreal, we are often faced with a dilemma of conscience. The most difficult to deal with of these dilemmas is when one of our own, so to speak, lowers their own standards of scrutiny and skepticism. When someone we all, for the most part, think of as a critically thinking person not only forgoes the use of critical thinking, but has the blatant nerve to ask us to do the same. In light of this, and to assure you, my audience, that I hold everyone to the same standards regardless of who they may be or what they may be talking about, I give you Steve Shives.
Hey, here are 5 stupid things I've noticed about rape culture. Denial by deconstruction. I've noticed a tendency among people who are skeptical of the notion of rape culture to deconstruct the term in an attempt to define it as literally as possible. Rape culture? You mean a culture that approves of rape? But in our culture, rapists are ostracized and held criminally responsible for their actions. We obviously can't have a rape culture.
I'm sorry, Steve, but a rape culture is exactly that. This is not a redefining, this is the actual definition. Those who would change the definition to suit their desired needs of the term are the ones redefining it. The most common definition, outside of feminist sites, defines rape culture as Wikipedia does, as a concept which links rape and sexual violence to the culture of a society, and in which prevalent attitudes and practices normalize, excuse, tolerate, and even condone rape. Marshall University defines it as an environment in which rape is prevalent and in which sexual violence against women is normalized and excused in the media and popular culture.
But the term rape culture doesn't refer strictly to a culture where rape is viewed upon generally as normal and acceptable behavior. Rape culture actually refers to the accumulation of beliefs, attitudes, and mores that encourage people to associate sexuality with violence, for instance, or to condone or at least minimize the seriousness of sexual assaults, or to view things like rape and other forms of sexual violence as inevitable facts of life that we just have to deal with. And these various beliefs, attitudes, and mores can manifest themselves in a variety of forms.
Actually, there is a large number of people who might find your first redefining as utterly offensive. This, of course, are the many people in the BDSM scene, men and women both, who are perfectly comfortable sexualizing violence, abuse, humiliation, and bondage. Now, they do not see their behavior as violent, but some may define the beating, bondage, whipping, and so on that takes place in this sexual subculture as a violence in a very broad sense. But the people engaging in the behavior, who are consenting adults, are not doing anything wrong, nor is anyone being raped. Your second definition, to condone or at least minimize the seriousness of sexual assaults, is the very definition that you seem to be refuting, or at least adding to by rephrasing the standard definition. The final definition you give is your own idealism getting the best of you. Not only that, it circumvents the problem to establish your own ideas of what the problem is. People are going to rape other people, always have, always will, and trying to imply rape culture exists as long as rapes occur is an association fallacy. On average, 237,868 people above the age of 12 are sexually assaulted every year in America. The good news is that rape and sexual assaults has actually dropped by more than 50% in the last 20 years, which is a strong indication that the rape culture people are saying exists does not. If the rate of sexual assaults and rapes has stayed steady where it was at in 1993, we would have had 5.5 million more rapes occur than the 4.2 million that have. Tell me, Steve, how does a monumental decline in actual rapes not demonstrate a fundamental flaw in the assertion that we live in a rape culture that permeates every single culture and subculture in America?
For instance, victim blaming. One of the most familiar examples of victim blaming is the insistence that women who dress in sexually provocative clothes are increasing their risk of being raped in the same way that a homeowner known to have a brand new big screen TV is increasing his risk of being robbed by not locking his front door.
While the assertion that the way a woman dresses may increase or decrease her chances of being raped is without merit when we look at why a rapist rapes, this is far from victim blaming. Victim blaming does occur, but if someone ignorantly suggests that women try to reduce their risks of being raped by advising them to dress more modestly, they are simply unaware of why a person chooses to rape another. The two most prevalent reasons a person may choose to rape is anger rape, wherein the rapist seeks to cause harm to the victim, to humiliate and debase them, and power rape, where the rapist seeks to compensate for their feelings of inadequacy by asserting power over their victim. A third reason is sadistic rape, wherein the rapist has a sexual association with either anger or power and is a subtype of one of the other two. All sadistic rapists are either anger or power rapists or both, but not all anger or power rapists are sadists.
The crucial detail missed by most of the people who say something like this is that neither the rape victim in the sexy dress nor the homeowner who has been robbed have done anything wrong, and yet it's the potential rape victim who's being presented with this analogy, not the potential theft victim.
That's complete horseshit, and you know it. In fact, the potential theft victim is not only presented with the analogy, but sold all sorts of theft prevention tools, home alarms, security systems, surveillance systems, and so on. This again is not victim blaming, but potential victim empowering. The person who suggests preventative measures to either type of victim is not saying it's your fault. They are saying that the threat is out there, very real, and here are some ways you may be able to prevent yourself from becoming a victim. For you to say that suggesting preventative measures is blaming the victims or forgetting they did nothing wrong is strawmanning the opposition.
The suggestion that rape should be dealt with by encouraging women to dress more conservatively doesn't deserve to be taken any more seriously than the suggestion that a rash of break-ins be dealt with by encouraging everybody to lock their doors at night.
Before I respond to that, I'm going to replay it, just so you know exactly what it is you just said and how nonsensical it was.
The suggestion that rape should be dealt with by encouraging women to dress more conservatively doesn't deserve to be taken any more seriously than the suggestion that a rash of break-ins be dealt with by encouraging everybody to lock their doors at night.
If what you said was true, then the suggestion to women to dress more conservatively actually does need to be taken more seriously. Because when a rash of break-ins occurs in a neighborhood, one thing to help prevent this from happening to you is to lock your door. There are other ways, such as automatic lights, alarms, and other security systems, and so on, but leaving your door unlocked at night is definitely not the way to prevent a break-in. That being said, the door locking suggestions should be taken seriously. The dress more conservatively should not. There are better things women can do to reduce their risk of being raped that doesn't involve dictating how they dress.
But there's another side to this, and it has to do not with victim blaming, but victim playing. According to some who are skeptical of the concept, the true victims of rape culture aren't women, but men, who are being broadly painted as potential rapists. Because the only reason for wanting to educate men about issues like consent or objectification of women is because women secretly believe that any given man is only 2 or 3 decisions away from becoming a rapist, obviously.
Another fucking strong man. What the hell, Steve? This sort of shit is beneath your normal standard of thinking. First, some of the most prominent feminist voices, which is who you're really talking about here, not women in general, do in fact broadly paint all men as potential rapists. They do not simply imply this, they state it, and keep stating it over and over on their YouTube channels, in their speeches, in their feminism workshops, and so on. This is not playing the victim. This is calling someone out on their bullshit sensationalism of the issue. This is telling these people who would make this assertion that not only is it insanely offensive to say such a thing, it is flat out wrong.
Another common complaint is that raising awareness about the issues involved with rape culture will only embolden vindictive women to falsely accuse men of rape out of revenge or a desire to exercise the mad misandric power that all women secretly covet.
Again, this is not victim blame because this has actually occurred. It has happened.
Thank you to everyone who was at that conference who engaged in those discussions outside of that panel. You were all fantastic, and I love talking to you guys. All of you except for the one man who didn't really grasp, I think, what I was saying on the panel, because at the bar later that night, actually at 4 a.m, we were at the hotel bar. 4 a.m. I said, I've had enough, guys. I'm exhausted. Going to bed. So I walked to the elevator, and a man got on the elevator with me and said, "Don't take this the wrong way, but I find you very interesting, and I would like to talk more. Would you like to come to my hotel room for coffee?" Just a word to the wise here, guys. Don't do that. I don't really know how else to explain how this makes me incredibly uncomfortable, but I'll just sort of lay it out that I was a single woman, in a foreign country at 4 a.m. in a hotel elevator with you, just you, and don't invite me back to your hotel room right after I finished talking about how it creeps me out and makes me uncomfortable when men sexualize me in that manner.
Another example of a man being falsely accused is Max Temkin, who was accused of being raped on Facebook by a, how did you put it, vindictive woman out for revenge for being dumped years earlier. To ignore that it has happened and to just say men are playing victim when this sort of thing does happen and if taken seriously could ruin their lives is just asinine. This sort of shit makes victims of not only the men who are wrongfully accused, but of the women who are actually victims of sexual assault. When lying about it causes people to doubt every story, those who are real victims are treated with undue and unfair amounts of skepticism, so much so that some may just decide to not file a report at all, or give up in the process of taking legal action against their rapist.
Of course, in order to assume that men are the true victims of rape culture, one would have to believe that those various customs and social pressures I referred to earlier either don't exist or aren't that important.
This is a false dichotomy, Steve. Perhaps to believe that some men have become victims of the assertions of rape culture, one simply needs to see that it does happen. Even if you are blind to this, you can still believe that men can become victims of the rape culture assertions by believing that it is possible for all those customs and social pressures you refer to are not as prevalent as you imply, but fail to demonstrate.
Which brings me straight to number 4, blindness to sexist social pressures. I have a hard time accepting that so many people, most of whom are fellow men, can't or won't see the sexism, misogyny, and male privileging gender inequality that still negatively affects the lives of millions of people here in my home country of the United States, let alone throughout the rest of the world.
Which one are you talking about, Steve? The U.S. or the rest of the world? Also, rest of the world is vague as shit. I deny that the sexism problems are as bad as you would imply they are here in the U.S., not because of ignorance or blindness to where it does exist here, but because of the evidence that suggests it is not as bad as you would imply. As far as the rest of the world is concerned, it is obvious that some places do have such social problems as bad and worse than you suggest exists in the U.S., but applying my skepticism towards your claims about the U.S. to the rest of the world is another straw man.
But even if you can't see it, you still don't have a very good excuse for ignoring it, because lots of women have seen it and have been talking about it very publicly for all of the last 50 or 60 years.
If I can't see it, then I have an excellent reason for ignoring it, much in the way I ignore the claims of the Bible. Lots of preachers and prophets have been talking about the Bible's claims for a hell of a lot longer with a hell of a lot more enthusiasm. Talking about something, presenting anecdotal stories as evidence, is just as invalid when applied to the existence of rape culture as it is when applied to the claims of the Bible.
All you have to do is listen. Not listen and rationalize, not listen and reflexively dismiss, but listen with the thought that maybe, just maybe, the person talking might know something about what the fuck she's talking about.
I'm sorry, but I don't care the least for your advice to foregoing the use of critical thinking just because of the source of information. I do not and refuse to assume validity simply because a person's gender is directly related to the subject matter that person is discussing. As with any claim that directly contradicts physical evidence, I will require evidence to support that claim.
Belittling of survivor experiences. One of the most regrettable results of rape culture and of the denial of rape culture is that women who have been victims of sexual assaults are made to feel as though their experiences don't matter. Educate people about rape, encourage men to be more aware of and sensitive to the concerns and needs of women, pursue rape prevention strategies that aim to change harmful customs and values instead of just teaching women where to park and how to dress.
It is unfortunate that some women are made to feel that way, but it is a broad statement to say women who are victims are made to feel that way, without any support that this happens as often as the statement implies leaves room for debate. No one denies that this happens, but saying that this is a sign of rape culture without showing it happens as often as you imply is circular reasoning. When people bring up statistics like instances of rape have dropped by over 50% in the last few years, that is educating people about rape. Sensationalizing the problem as a result of a patriarchal society that secretly condones and encourages rape is not educating people. It creates some of those concerns you mentioned and exacerbates others to where women are so afraid to leave their house for fear of being raped by any man they come in contact with. Telling women that most rape victims know their attackers before the rape occurs, and that most rape occurs within a mile of the victim's home, and explaining why a rapist rapes is educating people about rape. Claiming a rape culture that permeates every part of our society exists and telling people that giving advice on how to best minimize their chances of being raped is nothing but victim blaming is not educating. Oh, exactly what harmful customs and values are you talking about? This is vague, and I suspect intentionally. Maybe a harmful custom is that 60% of rapes go unreported. Maybe a harmful value is expecting people to believe claims simply because of the gender of the person making those claims.
I don't know. That sounds like a lot of work. And what about all those men who would never dream of raping someone? It wouldn't be fair to them, now would it? I'm sorry, honey. I mean, it really is a shame that you were raped, but big picture, it's just not that important. Run along now. Oh, would it kill you to smile more often? You're so much prettier when you smile. The hardest part is only picking 5. Catch you next time.
Okay, that last bit was another straw man, an attempt to demonize the counterpoints of those who are skeptical of the claim that there is a prolific rape culture in the U.S. When I first started this response, out of respect for you, I was going to forgo one of my traditional formats to the end of these. But after watching that damn video as many times as I have, fuck that.
Finish him!
I have a level of respect for you, Steve, that is much higher than I afford to most, and I'm actually a fan of your An Atheist Read series as well as this 5 Stupid Things series, but this is inexcusable. You approach the claim of the existence of a rape culture in the U.S. with the same fervent faith without evidence and the use of fallacious reasoning that your friend Ray Comfort does with showing the existence of his God. That's right, Steve. You have represented yourself in this video as a rape culture apologist. This is not typical of your way of thinking, and for the life of me, I cannot figure out why you would expect others to simply accept anecdotal evidence and forgo the use of critical thinking and skepticism toward the claims of rape culture that nearly every statistical bit of information on rape in the U.S. shows to be contradictory to reality. The only fact that comes close to supporting this assertion is that only 3 out of 100 rapists actually see jail or prison time for their crime. But even this statistic cannot be applied as evidence without being manipulated to say something it does not, especially considering 60 of those same 100 go unreported. Other facts that show, even if a rape culture does exist in the U.S., we cannot simply attribute it to some imagined, socially condoned patriarchal misogyny, is that 3% of American men have been victims of an attempted or completed rape. 15% of rape or sexual assault victims are children under 12 years old, 93% of which know their attacker, 34.2% of which were family members. The world can be a cruel place where people are made victims every moment of every day, someplace in the U.S. Crying out to the rest of the world that the problem women face of being raped is somehow deserving of special attention, and fabricating the existence of a culture that not only excuses and condones it, but encourages it in the U.S. to try to lay claim to that special consideration is insanely selfish. We teach everyone how to avoid or minimize their chances of being victims of all sorts of crimes, and only a selfish idealist will suggest that one type of victim of one type of crime deserves the kind of attention wherein we try to do the impossible and completely eradicate the crime through the use of everything but preventative measures that empower, not blame, the potential victim.